So welcome to today's topic on addressing anxiety in uncertain times through work-focused CBT. Nancy Gowan and I, Nicolette Gowan, had the opportunity actually to give this very similar presentation in Brussels, Belgium, back in, I guess it was end of September. And so we were speaking at the International Forum of Disability Management and just sharing what we're doing as occupational therapists with the rest of the world and those who are interested in disability management. So I've covered some Zoom rules, and I want to start today by introducing who I am. And so I am Nicolette Gowan. I am an occupational therapist, and I am also the owner and president of Gowan Consulting. I'll tell you a little bit more about Gowan Consulting. But myself as an individual, as I introduce myself, I like to kind of give a bit of a background and an acknowledgement to the land that I get the privilege of speaking to you and sharing this knowledge. So recognizing that as settlers to this land, and also myself being an Indigenous woman and having that connection through my father's heritage, that it's important for all of us, not just myself, to acknowledge that we are on Indigenous land. And so today I ground myself within Central Elgin, and I acknowledge that I'm located on the land of the McKee Treaty that was signed by the Wyandot, by the Anishinaabe nations, including ancestors of Chippewas of the Thames First Nation. It's also the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Attawandarak, and Mississauga Nation. And so I acknowledge that I am learning more about this and my connection with the land and our connection and our truth and reconciliation efforts. Gowan Consulting is a private occupational therapy company. We provide services across Canada. Our focus is on functional ability and work, helping employers to support employees to be as productive, healthy, and safe as possible in the work that they do. Our services include ergonomics, accommodation, stay at work, return to work, mental health support, training and workshops on these topics, assisting with policy development and consultation. And we also have online live events and some free webinars sprinkled in here and there. We also have a membership program, as I alluded to, our Mastering Health and Productivity membership, where members can join and be a part of a community and receive resources, knowledge, and learning and consultation on a regular basis. We at Gowan make the complex simple. We are a resource for you when it's challenging to support employees through changes in life and in work. And we work together ultimately for your healthy business. Today we're talking about anxiety and managing change. So when we think about change and we think about humans, we are really amazing in our capacity. And what sets us apart as human is our ability to think about future events. And this can be helpful. This can help us to anticipate potential obstacles or barriers to achieving our goals or potential problems that may come up. We can then plan solutions to these problems as they arise, which, yes, can be helpful because it helps us to achieve our goals. However, sometimes it can be unhelpful, and we'll talk about more of that today on when that thinking about future events and worrying about change can become unhelpful and unproductive. When we think about change, we also know that humans are creatures of habit. So we like to do what we like to do. We like to have certain routines, and we don't like to change out of that. And so what we've seen in the world over the past 3 years is constant change, constant shifting of habits, priorities, roles, the ways that we communicate, the things that we value. So we've changed our habits and maybe even changed our beliefs around some things. Change can mean uncertainty, and uncertainty is uncomfortable. Change is often out of our control, especially over the last 3 years. And one of the topics we'll focus on today is the returning to the office. Some of you on the line might be in an organization that is thinking about returning employees to the office, whether part-time or full-time. And that change is often out of control for our employees and maybe for us as well. So how do we manage that? So to sum it all up, change is difficult. And everyone handles change in a different way. Some people thrive on it, and some people get really anxious about it or really worried about it. And it can impact everything that we do in the way that we work and the way that we live. Coming back to thinking about future events, what often happens is that thinking of future events is worrying. We often think about the worst case scenarios. Worry is this chain of images or this chain of thoughts that starts with something simple. It might be an image, it might be a thought, it might be something in our environment that gives us that initial thought, but it progresses and it turns into a bigger worry and a bigger catastrophization until all of a sudden we're at the worst case scenario. Now, this is a normal human process. We all worry, but we don't all have anxiety. And worry can really contribute to anxiety. And we've seen such an increase in the amount of people that are self-reporting feeling high levels of anxiety. And you can see why that is with all of this change and uncertainty that we're under. So again, this worry often leaves us with a feeling of anxiousness and a feeling of apprehension about what could happen or what will happen. We often think that we can predict the future, but in reality, we never know what's going to happen for certain, bringing us to uncertainty and why that's so challenging. Uncertainty, by definition, is something that is not able to be relied on, it is not known, or it is not definite. So the events that are uncertain, that we don't have all of the information about, that we don't have past experiences to fall back on, are those events or life situations that cause us the most worry and the most anxiety. And when we think about the anxiety that happens, it's really this anticipatory anxiety. It is thinking about what could happen. And often it's not in our favor. Because the human brain really is an anticipation factory. As I talked about, we're able to think ahead. And when we think ahead, our brain makes those predictions. That's just what it does. So when things are uncertain, our anticipation factory can run wild. And so that can impact our state of anxiety, so the feeling in the moment of anxiety, trait anxiety, so people who just kind of have more anxiety around different situations, and then disordered anxiety and mental health diagnosed anxiety, whether that be generalized anxiety or social anxiety, that really can be exacerbated in individuals with mental health conditions. I alluded to the rise of anxiety globally, and the World Health Organization predicts that 25%, or there's a 25% increase in anxiety and depression. And really, it's probably due to a lot of the international uncertainties we've been under over the past 3 years. One of those big changes that we're seeing, and we have seen, we've tried to do, I guess, a few times over the past few years, is this returning to the workplace. But now that we see that restrictions are seeming to be lifted, things are really opening back up, and we don't have to wear masks anymore, that employers are saying, okay, this is really the time to start to think about or actually bring people back to the office. Because working from home might have worked for some, and there have been some studies that show that some people can be more productive while working from home. But we also need to look at the other side of working from home and the isolation that comes along with that and how that can impact mental health. So employers are seeing the importance of having people back in a physical office space to collaborate, to improve inclusion and belonging, and to reduce isolation. So you may be thinking of this for your organization, or you may be someone who has been told that you need to return to the office. Again, might be something that's out of your control. And it's change, it's uncertainty. It is developing new routines and new ways of doing things. So as creatures of habit, That's very difficult. There's also this aspect of health and safety. What does that mean to my health? Are there still risks out there? What are the restrictions that are going to be implemented? Are there any? What type of model are we going back to? Are we hoteling? Do we have office spaces? Is it an open office setting? What has changed since I was there? So many worries can go along with this transition and change. And so thinking about if you are someone who's undergoing this change, what are your personal worries about returning to the workplace? And that's where we come in as occupational therapists. And what we've seen lately is an increase in referrals to support employees in returning to the office. People are reaching out to say, I have a medical condition or I require an accommodation where I need to work from home. And sometimes that is the best solution, but not in all situations. And where that situation is underlined by diagnosed anxiety or depression, really what employees need, depending on the individual situation, could be support from an occupational therapist to look at the ways that they're thinking about returning to work and what are their behaviors in being able to make that transition. And again, as occupational therapists, we are focused on function. So what is it functionally that is stopping you? What is your barrier to getting back to the office? And that's what we want to target. So work-focused cognitive behavioral therapy can be one of those ways that we've assisted employees in managing the anxiety of returning to the workplace. Cognitive behavioral therapy looks at the connection between what you think, how you feel emotionally, and what you do, so your behaviors or your actions. And we know that all three of these are interrelated, and that if we change one of these three areas, we will impact the others. So cognitive behavioral therapy looks at ways to intervene and ways to build skills, practical tools and strategies that employees can take with them and implement to help them manage some of those unhelpful thinking patterns. You may look on the screen here and say, hey, you know what? I do that all the time. I often mind read. I tell myself that I know what someone else is thinking, and usually it's not in our favor again. Or catastrophizing. I'm always going to that worst case scenario. And sometimes that can be helpful because we can help to prepare for things. But when that's persistent and when that stops us from doing things that are important to us, maybe it is that social interaction that reduces the isolation. So you probably look at this and say, you know what, some of those are really common to me. And we all have unhelpful thinking patterns. But it's the individuals that have excessive unhelpful thinking patterns or cognitive distortions that really need additional support to be able to reframe those thoughts to then impact the way that they're feeling and the ways that they're behaving. So part of our intervention as an occupational therapist is educating on these very human and very common unhelpful thinking patterns that they may notice arise when they think about changing their routines or returning to the office or once again having to commute. What we also know, and as evidenced by this 25% increase in depression and anxiety, is that excessive worry leads to anxiety. So if we are excessively worrying, if we are constantly bombarded by our own unhelpful thinking styles, that we can develop anxiety. Whether that be persistent state anxiety, so situations are just giving us anxiety more often than they used to, or whether that becomes a diagnosed anxiety condition. Some physical symptoms of anxiety, and this really, it's the stress response. It's an evolutionary response in our body called the sympathetic nervous system, or the fight, flight, or freeze response, where we start to get physical changes, where really our body is trying to prepare for us to save us, to protect us from a threat. But our body thinks that any threat or any worry, any thought is a in the moment real threat to our health and safety. And so we get these reactions within the body. We get the increased heart rate so we can move blood out to our extremities to help us again fight or flight from whatever we're experiencing. Our breathing rate increases, we get an increase in blood pressure, shallow breathing, increase in muscle tension, aches or pains, difficulty concentrating, because imagine we're always looking for that worst case scenario, the danger that may happen. So how do we concentrate on the work that we have to get done or that deadline we have to meet? It can cause difficulty sleeping. We cannot shut off that brain that wants to go to that worst case scenario. So we start to feel overly tired. And it can lead to digestive problems as well, as we divert the blood away from our internal organs to help us, again, prepare for fighting or flighting. We're no longer getting that blood flow to our internal organs and our digestive system. So you may notice that you get maybe butterflies in your stomach or maybe nausea from feeling anxious. So we may start to develop digestive problems. So again, one of the things we do as an occupational therapist is to provide education. The more we're aware of what's happening and can normalize the experience, the better we can manage it. And we can put in strategies to be able to decrease that response and then to make the right decisions moving forward. So I talked a bit about the fight, flight, or freeze response, but really it's that perception of threat. It's our fear response. It is evolutionarily protective, and it's a normal and automatic physiological response. So letting people know how normal that response is can help us to not fear it so much. But really it impacts every aspect of our being. It impacts physical, emotional, cognitive, and behavioral. One of the first things we teach is how do you manage that nervous system reaction? When you notice your heart starts beating faster, maybe you're sweating, maybe you're getting more tense. How do we down-regulate that nervous system? So we can think of this as nervous system 911. It's the first thing you need to do before you can do anything else, before you can make a right decision, before you can decide how to best take care of yourself in the moment, or before you can communicate. We need to be able to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest system. Now, this system is where we're allowing that blood that has been diverted to our muscles to prepare us to fight or flight to come back to our internal organs, to allow our breathing rate to return to normal, to let us restore energy, because it takes a lot of energy to be in a fight or flight state. And a lot of us have been living in that state for 3 years. So teaching people how to regularly manage that helps us to let go of a stressful event, to shake it off, to close the stress cycle, and to make better decisions. Some of the things that we teach our clients is breathing methods, because that's a physiological tie to be able to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Some of the techniques we teach are belly breathing. So really trying to bring all of the air into the lungs and filling them as full as possible, and making your exhales longer than your inhales creates that physiological response and tells your body and your nervous system and your mind that you're safe. We also teach grounding strategies. So what are some cues to the present moment that can bring you out of that ruminating or excessive anxiety and excessive worrying and back to this present moment? So what can you do to ground yourself? Maybe that's a grounding stone, or maybe that's a simple act of focusing on feeling your feet on the ground, or the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method, where we're having where we basically look around our environment and we tell ourselves 5 things I can see in this moment, 4 things I can hear, or 4 things I can touch, 3 things I can hear, 2 things that I can smell, and 1 thing that I can taste. So activating all of the senses into what this moment has to offer, because worry and anxiety is future oriented, and a lot of depression is past oriented. Things that trigger worry and anxiety, there can be really any trigger. I said it could be an event, it could be something in the environment, it could be a thought that flashes into our head, it could be something that someone says. We also know that there's different types of worries or problems. There's the real world problems, what's right in front of us directly, or there's hypothetical, and that is the worry chains. That's the thinking about the future, about things that we can't control. But our mind doesn't actually know the difference between when we're picturing something in the future that is threatening or whether it's right in front of us. So we get that exact same response no matter what. So being able to discern, is this a real world problem? Is this something that I can do about? Can I do something about the war in Ukraine? Do I have any control over this return to the office? Do I have any control over my health and safety? Am I worrying about the future? And the way that we perceive a worry and the way that we think about it is a large contributor. And that's where work-focused cognitive behavioral therapy comes in. What we also know is that worry becomes more common in situations that are, one, ambiguous, so open to different interpretations. So not everyone is going to see that situation in the same way. And you can probably think of that when we think about returning to the office. Some people are really excited to get back in person and to switch up their routine. Some people like change, some people don't. So it's open to different interpretations. Novel and new. We don't have any past experiences to fall back on. Maybe we've tried opening our office spaces in the past, but have we actually made that transition and had employees come back to that setting? Does the office setting look different? Are we trialing more of an open office setting or a hoteling situation for those who are thinking about working in a hybrid manner? If we don't have anything to fall back on, that's when our anticipation factory can really run wild and we can worry even more. And finally, unpredictable, or as we use the word, uncertain. So we don't know how things are going to turn out. We don't know how it's going to impact us. We don't know how others are going to react and interact with us as well. Another tool that we teach employees along the same area of work-focused CBT is this decision-making tool. So asking ourselves when we're thinking or we're worrying about a problem, is this something that I can do about? Is there any aspect of this problem that I can control or that I can solve? If the answer is no, we need a list of things to do to focus on or to refocus on to be able to let that go. Maybe we need to learn strategies on how we practice actively letting things go. Maybe it's mindfulness. So teaching tools to be able to accept. If we can do something about that problem, okay, where do we start? So we teach our clients to sit down and write it out. What exactly can you do? What part of this problem can you control and what part of this problem can't you control? And let's focus on the parts that you can control and create an action plan for that. Okay, is there anything that I can do right now in this moment on my list of things that I can control or on my steps to solve this problem? If the answer is no, again, we go to that list. What can I focus on? What can I do that's important to me right now? And if we think about returning to the office, there are things that we can control about that return. We can control how we prepare for it, what types of routines we're setting up for ourselves, how we plan to communicate and interact with the individuals that we're returning to the office with. What does our daycare situation look like? And we can work on those things actively. And the other things we have to work on letting go. So if there's something you can do about it right now, work that out, do it now, because the quicker you do something about a problem, the less you can worry about it because you've dealt with it. Another thing we teach our clients to do is being very aware of those thoughts and the connection between what we're thinking, how we're feeling, and what we're doing or how we're behaving. And teaching employees how to change the ways that they're thinking. So there are exercises to assist employees in reframing their thoughts or worries and developing new healthy behaviors. So when we look at changing our worry, here's an example of two different thoughts that can occur when we think about going back to the office. One thought, one worry or anxiety could be, I will lose all of my work-life balance when returning to the office. My mental health will decline and my balance will suffer, right? If we focus on that and that's our thought about returning to the office, well, no wonder we're going to feel fear. or anger around not having control over that situation, or feeling frustrated with those who made the decision, or even those around us, and anxiety because we're worrying and we're getting that fight or flight response. So when we feel that fear or that anger, we maybe want to avoid. So our action, our behavior is like, avoid thinking about that. Let's put that off to the side and just avoid it, because I have no control over that, and I'm not going to do anything to prepare for that because there's nothing I can do about that. Well, that's not going to set you up for success. So an occupational therapist works with that employee on, how do you change your mindset around that? Is there anything you can control? Are you thinking in all or nothing? Are you catastrophizing? So what are those unhelpful thinking styles? And helping them to develop a healthier thought that is going to impact the way that they're feeling and their actions. So an alternate thought could be, well, I can, I guess, develop new routines, and I can make a plan, and I can plan for that balance. So how am I going to protect that? You know, some of that is in my control. Well, thinking that, you might still feel some fear or anxiety, and maybe still a little bit of anger, frustration around the situation, but it's probably reduced when you feel that sense of control over what's happening, and maybe more confidence in your own ability to manage that change. And so instead of avoiding that, when you know you can control that or an aspect of that, then you can start to practice. You practice a new routine. You start waking up a little bit earlier. You start making your lunch in the morning. You develop coping strategies or communication strategies if your worry is about your social interactions and how you're going to manage that. What are you going to do to protect your work-life balance, and creating a plan? So seeing that the situation at hand does not change at all in this scenario, but the ways that we think about it and the ways that we talk to ourselves about it can really impact the way that we cope with it and the way that we act. Just wanted to show this graph because I think probably most of us on the call know or could realize that the ways or the work or the sick benefit claims that our society has seen over the past many years has changed. And in 2022, mental health became the highest percentage of sick leave claims. So we're looking at a high percentage of individuals that might be experiencing this anxiety or depression around a return to the office even. So just to reiterate what we do and what you might think about to support your employees to return to the office, or to support your employees with managing any of their anxieties around their work situation. Maybe it's their social settings. Maybe it's being able to meet deadlines, or feeling pressures, or feeling like they need to be perfect in their work. There are many ways that occupational therapy can help. What we've done in the past is actually had a walk-in clinic where occupational therapists could be on site or virtual, and employees could access that occupational therapist to discuss their concerns and their worries. And what sets us apart as occupational therapists is that we are work-focused. Us at Gowan, at least, we're very work-focused. We focus on practical tools. We focus on strengths. So what strengths does the employee have that is going to help them manage this change? All sessions are confidential, offered during work hours, so we remove the barrier of accessing care outside of work hours. And on average, with the pilot project that we did, we had about 4 to 6 sessions with the occupational therapist to really go through this work-focused CBT, to address unhelpful thoughts, to provide even a bit of exposure therapy to things that they're scared of, and to do some on-site job coaching. So those are some examples of things we might work on in these sessions. And after this pilot project, 98% remained at work or returned to work during our sessions. Another very structured program that is grounded in work-focused cognitive behavioral therapy is our TIPS program. Now, we actually developed this program 1.5 years ago. Like right after the 2 weeks that we got sent home, we anticipated that people eventually would have to go back to the office, and that would be very worry-inducing. So we developed this program to help employees return to the workplace. And what we've seen is it doesn't just help with returning to the workplace, but it can help employees stay at work and manage any of those anxieties that they may have around their work situation, their work tasks, or their social interactions at work. So this session or this program looks at 4 sessions. So it can help to identify, like the first session is thoughts. So what are your thoughts? What are your worries? What is a worry chain? What are your unhelpful thinking styles? And then how can we start to reframe that? Integration planning. So how are you going to build the skills to be able to go back to the workplace? So in session 2 and session 3 is reinforcing what we've talked about the worries, but are there other behaviors that you can do to build new routines or to build coping strategies to manage that return? Preparation and practice of strategies is ongoing, and then offering services and supports. A few of the other strategies that we teach our clients when we're working with them in a work-focused CBT setting is cognitive strategies. So again, shifting the locus of control to I have no control over this situation to maybe, okay, I can't control that, but I can control this. Changing their thoughts, changing behaviors or coping strategies that can in turn change the thoughts. Looking for the positives in the situation and finding balanced ways of thinking of things. I never promote people just thinking positively because we also have to take in that not everything is positive right now, and we need to be aware of that. But we can look for positive because our brain is going to naturally look for the negative. So we have to actively train ourselves to look for positives. Using self-talk, for example, my thoughts are not facts. This might be a cognitive distortion. I'm thinking in all or nothing. So what do we say to ourselves to bring ourselves out of a worry loop? And one strategy we've taught before, or I've taught in many situations, is actually setting aside worry time, which might seem counterproductive, but that gives us this space that's after work or at a set time of the day where we're going to set a timer for 15 minutes and I'm going to write down my worries. And if there's a worry I can focus on problem solving, I'm going to use that time to do it. So when worries come up during our workday or during our social interactions with others or during dinner with our family, we can say, okay, I see you. I see you thought you are trying to cue my attention to something. There might be a threat there. Great, I've got time to think about that. I've got time to worry about that. And doing this can actually help with sleep as well. So doing some constructive worrying to help us kind of think through what we can control and what we can do. Behavioral strategies is looking for flow activities. So flow activity is where the level of challenge of the activity matches your level of skill. So sometimes people experience a flow activity as just getting lost in the activity. For some, it's exercise. For some, it's art. For some, it might be music, listening to music or creating music. And maybe sometimes it's distraction techniques. We don't recommend avoiding all of your problems, but we do recommend distracting sometimes when it is something you can't control and you just can't get that thought away. What can you do to focus on something else? We teach mindfulness, so practicing being in the present moment, non-judgmentally, and practicing connected with others, the importance of exercise, practicing good self-care, developing and maintaining routines. So maybe that's developing new routines or making sure that people don't lose their routines when they return to the office. And assertive communication and being able to communicate your needs. We know that this change doesn't just impact employees, but that there's actions that employers and managers can take to help make this change easier, to help manage or stop a worry chain. What we see in the psychology of worry is that worry is better managed when it's more predictable. So what we want to do is target the predictability of the change, help employees to be able to reasonably anticipate what's going to happen because you've given them that information. Giving control. What control do they have in the situation, and how do we impact control? And then making it more important to them. Why is returning to the office something I even need to do? So really helping people to see why their role in that return to office is important, why they're valued, and why it's just an important organizational direction. The first thing we need to acknowledge as employers and as managers is that change can be and is uncomfortable. And you might be feeling that as well. So you might be feeling uncomfortable about going back to the office or having everyone back in one space. What does that mean? And so the best thing you can do as a leader, as a first step, is to be vulnerable and say, I know this is hard. You're validating that experience and normalizing that it's a really awkward, uncomfortable, and for some very difficult feeling. You're acknowledging that it's not easy. So you're setting the stage for others to be vulnerable. Your role as a leader in a psychological healthy organization is to first be a role model for mental fitness. So what is the ways that you take care of yourself, that you're developing your own mental and physical fitness plans? How do you keep connected? Are you demonstrating that you take breaks as a leader, or do you work through your breaks? How do you encourage others to be mentally healthy when you're not demonstrating that in yourself? And then second is to recognize signs when people are struggling. So paying attention to function. How are employees, are you noticing changes in behavior? Are you noting changes in performance that were previously not there? And then you have a duty to inquire if there's something underlying that needs to be supported. And regardless, if you notice that, whether there's a medical condition underlying that or whether someone's just really struggling with this change, having that good conversation. Is there anything that I can do to support you to be successful in this change or at work? Making it predictable. So focusing on returning to the office, if this is something you're exploring, you want to make it as predictable as possible. So start by discussing the changes early. So even if you don't know the schedule, the date, how it's going to roll out, it's even just starting the discussion. As an organization, we've been discussing moving back into the office. We don't have any more information than that right now, but as I have it, I'll give that to you. And as you have that information, letting them know what to expect. How are you going to book your seats if it's hoteling? How many days of the week are you going to be in office? What control do you have over the situation? What is your flexibility in the manner? Are there specific meetings or tasks that you need to be in the office for and some that you don't? So being clear on what will happen and marking out the steps for change. And then explaining what you need from each person. So as an organization, this is what we need because of the task that we're doing, because of the collaboration that we need, because we really just need people back and connected. So what do I need from you as an individual in coming back to make this successful? As much as you can, within the confines of your organization, letting them have some control over the change. And that will look different for every organization. But outlining, this is what you can control, and this is what we need from you. These are the non-negotiables. So maybe you can control which day of the office you're in. Maybe you can control a shift. So you want to do 8 to 4, that's fine. Or you want to do 9 to 5, that's okay. Or can you choose when your break times are? What exactly is it within the control? And if you can, giving them as much control as possible in the pace of it. Maybe it's a gradual return. Eventually we want to get to 3 days, but we're going to start with 1, and you can choose which day that is. And giving those options just where possible. And I know that different organizations will have different confines to that. And finally, why is it important? So letting the team, each individual, know why and how they are valued as a team member and that they belong. So being clear on how each person's role impacts that change. We need you in the office because we really need your input on this. or we need you in the office because one of your strengths is bringing people together. And we really need that social connection as a team, and they would really be missing a key part of their team if you're not in the office. So why is each team member important? Helping them to connect to the purpose of their role and the decisions that are being made about the change, and letting them know why they're valued. Finally, when we have difficult conversations around these changes or this uncertainty and things that could be causing worry for our employees, it's listening. The most important thing you can do is listen. And listening with your ear. Empathy, attention, and respect. So understanding that each team member is going to manage this differently. Some are going to take it really well and be really excited about it, and some are going to have a really hard time with it. So how can you listen to what their concerns are and validate that that is hard? And then have a collaborative solution generation process. And take any responsibility for areas that might have been a misstep by the organization. You know what, we could have given you more information up front, and I understand why that's causing a lot of worry, but here's what I can tell you now. Understanding and taking accountability for things that you might have been able to do differently or better. And always assume positive intent. So employees are not coming with the intent to make your life harder, to do less work, or to be less productive. So any situation, always assuming that positive intent and giving people the most respectful interpretation. And that comes with really good listening. And finally, it's developing solutions collaboratively. So again, ask them for their input. What is the best way we're going to make this work for you? How are we going to make you excited about coming back to the office? Creating that psychologically safe space where people can challenge what's happening, where they can create and collaborate and speak up about what is challenging for them. In summary, I leave you with beware, our mind plays tricks on us. Our mind tells us stories that we can really target in work-focused occupational therapy, and we've seen a lot of success with working one-to-one with employees on managing that change, and also with working on managers to build the skills to be able to support that change. As you know, this is our membership presentation. This is an example of the type of webinar you may receive when you join our membership. So in our membership, you get one monthly webinar. You get a new resource or tool for your employees. You have a one-to-one consultation with an occupational therapist every month on a difficult file or case. And you have a connection to a group of individuals who are learning and supporting this and seeing different challenges in their workplace. And you get 25% off all of our training and workshops. Just want to mention a couple of the live training events that we have coming up. We were meant to have the Implementing CSA Disability Management Standards workshop today. Unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, we did have to move that session. So there's still time to sign up and learn more about that. And we have our public virtual manager mental health training session coming up. Both of these sessions led by Nancy Gowan. And the next session for manager mental health training is November 17th, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Contact us to learn more about that or sign up on our website. Speaking of website, we have a new website. So if you haven't joined us over the past couple of months on our website, take some time to check it out. We've made some really great changes. And I always welcome feedback on the website as well. So if you notice a spelling error or a grammar mistake, or if things don't make sense to you, I want to know about it. So please check it out. Download our free toolkit, our Mental Health and Inclusion Leader Toolkit, and learn all about our services. Our training, our live events, and our blogs are now available in one place. We used to have a separate website for our training services, but they're all combined into one now. Our one-stop shop, www.gowanhealth.com. And finally, get social with us. Add us on your LinkedIn, your Twitter, your Instagram, your Facebook, and reach out to our main email there if you have any questions at all. I ran over time. I do that sometimes. I'm really sorry for anyone that needs to get going, but I just want to say thank you for spending the last 45 minutes with me. Hopefully you learned something, and if you want to learn more, please do reach out to us.